So in the last tutorial, I showed you the basics of how to get started creating Swift files for Flash Player 10 using MXMLC, and this is the file we created last time. Well, in this tutorial, I'm going to show you one of the most exciting new features, and that's the native 3D support in Flash Player 10. This allows you to manipulate display objects in 3D space. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new sprite subclass. I'm going to call it 3D. Let's create that. So here's my shell for my project. I'm actually going to be using Tweener in this project to do some animation in 3D space. So I'm going to import the Tweener classes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a container sprite that's essentially going to hold all of my 3D objects. So I'll create that here, and I'm just going to call it cont for short. I'm going to make it a sprite. And now let's go ahead and set that up. So I'm going to create a new sprite. And now I'm going to center it in the middle of my movie. So I'm going to do cont.x is equal to stage.stage width times 0.5. And actually, before we move any further, let's go ahead and set our Swift metadata, like I showed you how to do in the last tutorial. So I'm going to leave everything at the defaults here. Okay, and now for the Y, I'm going to do something similar, except this is going to be stage height. And then obviously you're going to set the Y. And now let's add this container to the display list. Okay, so now I have my container sprite. So now I'm ready to start creating my 3D objects. Well, essentially, there is no special 3D object. All display objects now, whether they be movie clips, sprites, bitmaps, they all have the ability to be manipulated in 3D space. So I'm going to create a function called makeChildren that's going to go ahead and go through and create 100 sprites and put them into 3D space. So I'm going to come down and create that function now. So makeChildren. Okay, so what I want to do is create a for loop here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually count down this for loop because that's going to help me. So when you're putting things into 3D space, there is no special Z depth that Flash does for you. So which objects are in front of one another is just based on the typical order in the display list. So I'm going to count down from 100, which is going to help with that. And let's use unsigned integer just to make it a little faster. So now what I'm going to say is var is going to start at 100, and while var I is going to start at 100, while I is greater than 0, and then I'm going to decrement I each time along. So I is going to start at 100 and it's going to go all the way down to 0. Okay, so what I want to do in this for loop is to create sprites. So I'm going to create a sprite called sp is equal to new sprite. And just to make it a little bit cooler, I'm going to set the alpha on this to 0.8 so we can kind of see the other objects that are in the 3D scene. Now, another thing we're going to do is essentially we're going to be putting these sprites in 3D space. Now, when you click on the sprite, I'm going to have the quasi camera move and focus in on that object. So again, since these are just regular display objects, they're fully interactive. So I'm going to respond to the click event